There are people that I work with through the project teams I work with, and I can tell that they were an A student, right? They usually they only speak when they have the answer. They never speak when they don't have the answer, right? Because they don't want to be wrong. And the place that this translates into an innovation is when you see a lot of innovations, people end up trying not to be wrong as opposed to being better. And so what happens is they want to build the best thing. They want to get the A. And a lot of times innovations are B's and C's that literally take over the world.
Today on Nelda Live, we're here with Bob Moesta, a prolific innovator, engineer, and business leader. He has thought deeply about how to foster innovation by understanding the problem, studying people's hidden motivations, and asking a ton of questions, and the right questions. He will walk us through his process for creative problem solving, and hopefully you can apply some of these lessons in your own work, negotiations, and relationships. Bob, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Excited to share.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you're here. You have spent your career focused on innovation and have worked to develop over 3,500 products and services.
Yeah.
That seems like an incredible number.
Yeah.
How did you get into this line of work? What is your journey?
So it's a great question. So the best way I say it is I'm 55, but I've been breaking things for at least 50 years. I've had to learn how to fix things for at least 45 years. But out of that, I learned how to build things, and I've been doing that for 30 years.
Wow.
The other thing is that I was, as a child, I was a very ambitious kind of over-energetic child, and I ended up having 3 close head brain injuries before I was 7 years old, that very limited the way that I read and I write. And so I had to actually figure out a whole different way to really understand kind of how I learn and kind of hack the system to get through it. And so to me, talking and building and understanding frameworks is kind of like how I have to hack the system so I can understand how the world works. So that's really, and from that, I've had great opportunities to have good mentors and to be honest, I've just ended up solving very unique problems that most people have a hard time kind of framing, and people just keep pulling me into very, very strange things. And so ultimately I get to solve really unique problems every day. It's so fun.
Oh, so help us understand then innovation. What does innovation mean to you?
So there's actually 2 sides to innovation. There's what I call supply side innovation, which is like the technological innovation, the physics or the engineering behind it. But then there's what I call demand side innovation, which is the consumer side, or basically us as people. We have to learn how to innovate to actually bring things into our lives. And so we start to realize that us as humans, we're actually creatures of habit. We love habit. We love to do the same thing over and over again until we think there's either a better way or we have a problem. And so part of this is understanding that innovation is actually a 2-sided thing, and that, to be honest, real innovation actually happens on the demand side first with a struggling moment. And then out of that, then we pull things from the supply side in. And most people think we innovate from the demand side or the supply side of the world. But I actually think about innovating from the demand side of the world, which is the customer side of the world.
So innovation, it is a popular kind of buzzword,
for
example. But now you can get a degree in innovation. Can you teach innovation?
This is a great question on this front. I think like anything else, I can teach you about swimming and I can teach you about riding a bike, but the best way to learn is for you to do it and to actually practice it. And so I think of innovation as more of like a trade where we have to actually learn a lot of things, and it's about integrating. So there's a lot of core concepts you have to do, but the fact is that because innovation it's not necessarily a predictable thing. It's about being able to learn and discover and adapt very quickly. And so it's about, you can have a process to do it, but the fact is the process alone is not how you make the decisions. And so to me, I think you can learn the foundations, but like I'm writing a book right now, and I part of it is I'm writing like letters to my younger self to say like, okay, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, because there's certain things where you're trying to make the perfect things, and what I've learned is nothing is perfect. It's all about trade-offs.
So in our society, are you seeing growth in innovation?
So another great question, because here's the thing is, I think we actually have way too much technological innovation that's beyond our abilities to actually consume it. I think we could actually stop innovating for almost 10 years and help consumers catch up. Because I think at some point in time, we've actually made things so easy for people that they actually don't know what they want to do next. And again, like I said, the struggling moment is kind of the seed for all innovation. And so as we struggle, that's how we learn how to do new things. And so to be honest, the pandemic is actually causing us to innovate because we can't do things the way we used to, which is it's awesome and incredible. And the interesting part is there's a group of people who are out there going like, well, I just can't wait for it to get back the way it was. Well, my belief is it will never get back to the way it was. It will actually be a hybrid of what we're doing now and what we used to do, and it will be a better combination of both.
You know, I see that too, and I agree with you on that part, at least from my perspective of things. So what are some of the big things people get wrong when thinking about innovation?
Most people frame innovation as something new, something different, something unique, something patentable. And they confuse what I say is invention with innovation, right? And what I would say is a good example of that is like the Segway. The Segway is a great invention. It's an amazing, the whole thing is it was going after people who didn't want to walk was the main premise behind it. And if you understand a way in which to actually take a two-wheeled vehicle and have somebody stand on it and keep gyroscopes to keep it balanced and being able to move, it's amazing. But it's really not an innovation. Like contrast that with birds. Birds are those scooters that you see around towns and in cities where people can just pick one up, use their phone, connect to something, and go from point A to point B, where it helps them make progress in their life. And the fact is, it's actually accessible in a very different way. So innovation is about actually helping people make progress and helping society. And so an invention can be something that is unique and patentable, and it falls into the creative realm. But the fact is most innovations are about actually helping people at mass scale to make progress or to have access to things they never had access to before.
Wow, that's a good illustration. Okay. So when you're starting this creative process to do something new or do something better, what are some of the first things that going through your mind? I mean, how do you start looking for ideas? Yeah.
So this is you had sent me some of the questions, and the interesting part is I have my computer read them to me. Right. And I'm like, so the way it said is like something like, when you start the creative process, like I don't actually think about this as a creative process. I think about this as a way in which to build boundaries around problems or situations or context and outcomes that enable me to say, how can I actually then go find things that will help people in this moment in time? And so to me, it's about building the right frames and the right box and the right boundaries, and then being creative inside the box, as opposed to the notion of blue sky or blue ocean or like where do you start? I start in the same place every single time, which is, where do people struggle? Where do they want to make progress, but they can't? There's a difference between people complaining about something and wanting to do something about it. And so there's this whole aspect of understanding motivations that I mistake in the beginning of like, well, boy, everybody's complaining about it, I should go build something. And a lot of times that just because they're complaining doesn't mean they actually want to do anything about it. And so it's finding these true struggling moments, or in some cases, what I call these non-consumption moments, where people want to make progress, but they just don't think it's possible. And so how do we actually then figure out how to innovate in those spaces?
So you're famous for the jobs to be done theory for innovation. Tell us what that is.
Early in my career, so I'm an engineer, basically electrical undergrad, studied a lot of mechanical, chemical, had some computer science, and then basically became an entrepreneur and built and sold products, right? And one of the things that I realized is that the way that the people describe the market is basically through describing people in words and attributes, and I just didn't understand any of it. And so one of the things I went off to do is I basically built a method to interrogate consumers to say, why did you change from something to something else? Because I figured when you sit down and talk to somebody about what they want before they've bought something, you start to realize like they really don't know what they want, and they make it up. And then when you build it and they go, here it is, like, oh no, that's not really what I wanted. And so part of this is I had to figure out how to go deeper. And so the frame that I wrapped around it was this notion of people don't buy products or services, they hire them to make progress in their lives. Now, it's not a new frame. Ted Levitt said is people don't want a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole, right? And so it's this notion of asking why 5 times that get you deep enough to understand what are the struggling moments in people's lives that say, why'd you get a new mattress today? What caused you to say, I need a new mattress? And what were you hoping for when you got that mattress? And it's that two-sidedness of the problem and the outcome, or the context and the outcome, that help us frame now those walls about where to innovate within. So I'm not trying to build the best mattress, because the best mattress actually has 3 or 4 different definitions depending on the context they're in and the outcome they want. And so I'm able to see the world, and I've been able to kind of build a framework to help see the world in almost these rooms, or these doors that people have to open in order to buy a new mattress. And what you start to realize is there's not one reason why people buy mattresses. There's not 1,000. Turns out there's 4 different main pathways of what causes people to say, today's the day I need a new mattress. And once you understand it, then it becomes very, very easy to innovate. So I've actually kind of cheated innovation by making sure that I focus on very, very important points in time in people's lives. And for every one person who's figured it out, there's 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 people behind them still trying to figure it out.
So let's just, I know my brain, sorry, you're only exploding me a little bit in the head, but anyway. So what are some examples of some of the jobs and products that you yourself have worked on? So
I've worked on things that range from, understanding what causes people to choose, to choose a new job, right? I figure that I actually think employees hire companies more than companies hire employees. And so what causes you to say, today's the day I'm going to leave this job and go to a new job? What progress are you trying to make? From a product perspective, I worked on Snickers. Think of this, is that before when I grew up, Snickers was known as packed with peanuts, and Snickers satisfies. But when you really actually understand the context, which is typically you've missed the last meal, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, your stomach is growling, you need to focus, and you can't actually step away to do anything. You literally grab a Snickers and mainline the food in, so it's thick, it's basically enough food that basically stops the grumbling, and you can get done what you need to get done without spoiling your next meal. And so you start to realize that once we said is what you're not you when you're hungry, right? And the fact is understanding the context and the outcome of what it does. The fact is we don't have to talk about the features and benefits anymore. And it goes from a $600 million product to a $3 billion product.
Wow.
Right. So there's that. So those are, I can go on. I've done a lot, but it's this frame around context creates value. Right. So like I always say, do you like steak or do you like pizza? And most people will say, I like both. Right. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, if I take the last pizza situation, which is, I've got 4 kids, we're running around playing hockey, we're doing all these different things. And it's like, okay, if I take and say, well, like, why pizza? Well, it's like, I can get two, I can make sure that everybody's going to eat everything. I can make sure that I don't have to necessarily cook it. And the reality is, like, we can get it on the table and start eating quickly versus steak. Right. If I put steak in that situation, it's like just horrible. Right. And so part of it is you realize that context creates value. And so that's really what I start for innovation, is to understand what are those moments where people want to make progress.
So let's talk about techniques to foster creativity, because you talk the beginner's mind. So what is the beginner's mind, and how is that important to creativity?
Yeah. So I think I would say one of the greatest gifts I ever got was the gift of dyslexia. Because at some point I knew I was going to be wrong. I knew that I was never going to get an A, right? And so part of it is to know that I have reps. And so the interesting part is that I always start with, like, even if I've done something in the past, right, it's like I have no idea, like, really how this works or why somebody does what they do. And so, to be honest, it starts with the emptiness of, like, I don't know. And you have to be able to admit you don't know. And so I think in a lot of corporate environments where people want to invent, they actually can't admit they don't know. And so they just move past their assumptions. And so the beginner's mind is more about the empty mind and the curiosity of, like, I don't know, and I want to know, is why the beginner's mind is important, because just being an empty mind doesn't help. But it's like, every time I sit down to talk with somebody, I'm like, I have no idea why you bought these new pair of shoes, or you bought this new house. And when you start to actually have the conversation, it's like they actually thought it was this, like, and when you actually hear the whole story, it's actually 5 or 6 or 10 different reasons why they bought it, not just one.
Let's talk about that part of it then. How does asking questions promote creativity?
Oh, yeah. So, so I have 4 really essential mentors, and in my office, as you can see, there's the 4. Dr. Willie Moore, Dr. Genichi Taguchi, Dr. Clayton Christensen, and Dr. W. Edwards Deming. I was an intern for Dr. Deming. I worked with Dr. Taguchi and Clay, and Willie Moore was my first boss. But all of them, I was that annoying child who asked 1,000 questions, because that's how I learned. And Dr. Deming summed it up best. He goes, the reason why I ask so many questions is that I need to actually have a theory about how something works. And without questions, you actually don't actually understand how anything works. The other part is Clay said it very well by saying questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. And so if you don't actually ask a question, whatever somebody tells you bounces off your head and drops right on the floor. And so to me, questions are at the cornerstone of being innovative, because it's not questions where you have hypotheses, like you're trying to prove a hypothesis of something you believe. It's more about, like, I actually don't know. And it's about, so a lot of the research I do, I call it hypothesis building research, not hypothesis proving research. And you find that it's very, very different in nature. And so to me, questions are at the core of it.
Do you think that we encourage kids to ask enough questions?
No. Here's the thing is I think I think education is one of those things that's due for a very big disruption, because at some point, I'll say one of the best books that I've ever come across, and that, to be honest, I listen to it every year, and I've become very good friends with Todd, is called The End of Average. And he's at the Harvard School of Education, and he talks about how everybody actually learns differently, and that we've somehow built a standard through the average, and there are people who are better than the average and less than the average, and there's a lot of assumptions about how it works. Like, for example, I'm really, really good at math, but I can't spell at all. And so part of it is there's this whole notion of assumptions that if you're good at one thing, you're good at others. And so we don't understand the jaggedness of how we learn. And so I really, really think that the fact is that being able to help people, help especially kids ask questions, and to be comfortable with being like not knowing. Like there are people that I work with through the project teams I work with, and I can tell that they were an A student. Right? They usually only speak when they have the answer. They never speak when they don't have the answer, right? Because they don't want to be wrong. And the place that this translates into an innovation is when you see a lot of innovations, people end up trying not to be wrong as opposed to being better. And so what happens is they want to build the best thing. They want to get the A, and a lot of times innovations are B's and C's that literally take over the world, like birds.
Wow.
Right. And so it's a very interesting, I think it's almost like it's that thing of, like, some people are just want to be so right that they don't understand how much it limits them from actually seeing what's possible.
Okay, Bob, let's talk a bit about education.
I can't wait. This is like this is one of my passions, for sure.
Well, me too, to be honest with you. I've educated in almost every area of education. So, and what I mean by that, not public, private, home education and then online learning as well. So,
my mother was a elementary school teacher for 30 years
wow.
in Detroit public schools. And she started as a remedial reading teacher. And she realized when I was in third grade that I only read what people had read to me, and that I couldn't see the words. And at some point, she's like, okay, we need to figure out how you really learn. And so to me, I learned how I learned when I was about 7 years old. Most people don't learn how they learn until they're about 35, because they learn by the way somebody teaches them, as opposed to learning how they naturally learn.
That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. So you wrote a book called Choosing College, How to Make Better Learning Decisions Through Your Life. Let's talk about that book.
Yeah. So part of this is that I feel like in the U.S. we have this huge problem where people have been given the expectation they should go to college, but they don't know, in some cases, they don't know why they're going to college, or what they're hiring college for, or what progress they're trying to make. And what we start to realize is that sometimes the parents want kids to go to college more often than the student does. And in some cases, when the student actually is more motivated, they actually do way better. And so part of it is to actually understand what we think is, well, we need to inject motivation into the student. And my thing is no, the context is what creates motivation for the student. It's not other people. We motivate ourselves. It's context that then helps us shape our motivations. And so part of this is when in doing some work with SNHU, which seeded it about 10 years ago, we figured out what causes somebody to come back to school. And Paul LeBlanc basically took that research that we did and basically built his online school, right? Which is basically one of the jobs is about this notion of stepping it up, which is like, okay, I have a job. I now have responsibilities. It's time for me to step it up. I don't like what I'm doing now, and I really need to go from a job to a career, or I'm a nurse and I want to be a teacher, or wherever they're at, they don't like it, and wherever they want to go to a place that they think is better, and school is the means by which they can get through it. So they see beyond school, right? And in doing that, he basically started to kind of help people realize, like, you don't need to go back to campus. We are actually building an online school to help you do this. He turned his he changed the whole admissions process. He basically made all his academic advisors, life coaches, and enabled them to actually help whatever the student needed to actually help them make progress, because they had real life wrapped around them. And he went from about 500 online students in 2010 to I know he has over 150,000 as of 2019. I think he's going to be in the 200,000 student range, where he's graduating over 50,000 students a year right now.
Wow.
And it goes to this notion of how many people want to go back to school but can't. Right. And again, the reason why he made it work, it wasn't about just repackaging. This was about reforming how learning happens not in classrooms. How do we so it's not about knowledge, but about helping them make progress. And because he took a different approach to it, everybody else has some online stuff, but most people aren't as successful as Paul, because he's really focused on the customer and the consumer side of things, or the student side of things. And so to me, it's really about helping students, helping students understand the progress. Why are they learning math? Like, we feel like we just got to fill them full of knowledge. It's like we treat them like a vessel. And I just joined a school board, to be honest, in June, because I saw everybody leaning back in the middle of this pandemic. And I'm like, no, this is the time we need to lean in. Like, we're just going to wait to see what the governor has to say. I'm like, what does the governor know about your students? Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do. And oh, by the way, we can see this as an opportunity to help us actually do a lot of new things differently, as opposed to before. I feel like we've innovated more in the last 4 months in education than we have in the last 40 years.
Yes.
And it's amazing. I'm just having so much fun there.
You and I should have lunch together. Yeah. I'd love to talk more about that.
Oh, I got a lot of things going on there. So you just start peeling back the onion. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So first of all, is college for everybody?
I don't believe so. No, I think college is for people. Like, I think there's actually times and spaces in your life when college will be valued. I think it's actually, it's too expensive for basically the outcomes that people are getting from it. They're actually buying it and committing a future of their life that they actually don't understand what they're committing to it. And so to me, it's almost like, I think there's a lot of things where people can learn and learn differently, where they can actually have a profession and do their passion without necessarily going to college. I think college has become, like, again, everybody says, well, everybody should go to college. And I'm a big proponent of, you should figure out how you learn and then figure out how you add value to society.
Okay. So then following that, what is the purpose of college? And is it to provide some kind of cultural experience? What is it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Well, I think there are professions. There's an accounting profession. There's a medicine profession. I think part of it is that for us to make sure that we have people who go into professions that help our society run. So part of it is their role is to actually keep those standards and make sure that we do that, right? I think at the same time, and I think college is doing this job, but I don't think actually people know it, but it's like helping me figure out what I don't want to do, right? And help me actually become an adult. Like, there are those kinds of things. And for that the price we have to pay, which is anywhere from, I'll say, I think the minimum is going to be $15,000 a year to $70,000 a year. I'm not sure that I want to be paying that price to actually have my children learn those things, right? And so my thing is that at some point, how do you actually make sure that college prepares them for something they want in the future, but at the same time help them actually understand what they're good at, where their passion is, and help them try things that enable them to kind of find their path, right? It feels like it's very cookie cutter. It feels that it's trying to basically, we're only trying to take, the certain test scores, all those kinds of things. And like I said, it's like the A students aren't necessarily the best innovators, right? And so it's these things where I think we need different standards wrapped around it. But I think there should be different kinds of colleges. And at some point, there should be something in between high school and college that allows them to have a much broader set of experiences to enable them to kind of opt in and opt out, right?
Right.
Like, so one of the things as a dyslexic is, and this happened all the way through school and all the way in my corporate life when I was at Ford, was I would get the review and they would always tell me that I needed to get better at spelling. So I would spend 2 hours a day, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day, trying to do spelling words, trying to do crossword puzzles, trying to actually figure. And at 35, I finally gave up. I said, screw it. I'm not going to, I can't do it. And one of the things my mom promised me that I would never tell people that I had this injury because she felt I would be discriminated against. And the notion is by the time I was 35, it was around 2000, I basically said, look, I'm dyslexic. I can't read and I can write. Oh, they're like, oh, that makes sense. How can I help you? I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You'll help me instead of criticize me all the time. And so I think people finding their strengths and there's things that I can do. Now, let's be clear. My inability to read and write has given me superpowers in other directions. I can see patterns in math. I can do like these other things. And so part of it is to figure out, what am I really good at? What am I not good at? And direct me towards kind of what's the kind of profession. And so for like, I have 4 children and what we did is we basically helped them eliminate what they didn't want to do. And out of that came kind of what they wanted to do. But instead of trying to have them pick the one thing they wanted to do, we just actually started with a 360-degree view and kind of eliminated directions. Right? Like, I don't want to be like I like math, I like science. Well, you could be a doctor. I was like, well, no, I don't like blood. I don't want it. That's too much, there's all these other things. So you say like, okay, how do we actually help them find what gives them energy? So I have as an innovator, I find that there's this aspect of like, when you walk in a room and you can feel the energy, and you can feel the energy either be, almost like there's a room that gives you energy and there's a room that sucks your energy. It's like, I know how to see that. And so those are the things that I'm trying to actually figure out and it's more like a resonant frequency of like what resonates with people and doesn't. And that's a way in which to start to see what people should be doing. Because when people are doing what they love, they don't even see it as work anymore. Right?
Right.
And so this is what it's about, preparing us for it. So I like whether it's engineering or whether it's liberal arts. I actually am a big fan of the liberal arts program because it actually helps people have a broader view of the world, but it doesn't necessarily help them then decide what it still promotes this notion of like, well, I want to go do this thing. And the reality is like, but there's no position out in the world to make that happen. And so I think they actually give them too lofty of dreams, as opposed to realizing like most dreams have to have half steps in between them to get you there.
So let me ask you a question then about that then, Bob. What tools do you see for either in earlier education or even in college, just how to help people discover what motivates them?
One thing is you have to realize that context does it. So as people's contexts change, they might be motivated to do math at one age and something else in another age. I actually think it's about actually being able to bundle things. Like I'm a big proponent of project-based learning, Montessori type learning. I think the notion of being able to integrate and pull things together, as opposed to have, kind of verticals of like, I know math, I know science, I know that like the notion of compartments. I feel like the horizontal skills are the skills that actually make people really, really successful. They have to have some vertical, but when you pull it together, people remember stories way better than they can regurgitate kind of facts. Now, there's certain parts of the brain where I think it has to be. I think, to be honest, what's really missing for all of this is we don't actually have a really good understanding of how people learn. We don't know how people process the information in. We don't know how people store that information. We don't know how they integrate that information. We don't know how they pull it back. Like, my belief is that for us to truly innovate in education, we have to actually get a new way to think about the way we learn, and to realize there's not one way to learn, but there are going to be components or modules that of a way to describe. Like when you say the word apple, right? I see, a picture with a tree in the background. And so I need the other words wrapped around the word apple to actually start to frame it. Like, I see no words. There are other people, when you say the word apple, they see the word. And it's like, and then they're trying to actually figure out that, like, so they have to read all the words and then they create a picture, or then they have meaning behind it. And so understanding those small little ways in which those pathways by which we form thoughts, I think that's where the work needs to be done.
So I see a cut apple and I taste the apple.
Right. So that's even better. So here's the thing is not, so all of a sudden I have an image, you actually have a sensorial cues. So not only is it cut, but you're biting into it. So you actually probably start having the pre-notion of what it's going to taste like. You probably have some smell of it. And the fact is, like, and I'll have to just say the word, and your brain is already firing up on all these other things. And so part of this is to realize, like, as a teacher, we've realized, like, we have to teach. This is Todd Rose's point, is we teach to the average. Like, you have a huge sensory kind of way in which you process information. I have a visual way, and other people have a kinesthetic way. And so you start to realize, like, the teachers are trying to actually help these kids learn, but they're just kind of shooting things down the center of the aisle and hoping people can pick it up. And the variation is just getting wider and wider in the room. And because at some point we don't want to have things go one way or another. And so it's this notion of, like, teaching is getting worse because people are thinking way differently.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting problem. And it's one of those things where, again, I think that we've evolved for the last 100 years, but I don't think what got us the last 100 years is going to get us to the next 100 years. And somehow we have to realize that there's a lot of change that's going to happen along the way. Okay,
Bob, we're going to have to interview again. We're going to have to get together.
I'd love to come back. My thing is I'd love your viewers to basically listen and bring in questions, and we'll come back and answer their questions. I mean,
I have one of those, and I want to maybe, in closing, because I know we have to let you go, which is the hard part. But what are you seeing? I guess you talked earlier about the changes and innovations that are going on because of the pandemic. So, yeah. So tell me if you can summarize maybe a few of those things that you're seeing that you think will come out a little more specifically. Can we?
Yeah, I think part of this is. There's no question that the pandemic is hard for teachers and students because it's just changed. They've been forced to change, but there's things that they're picking up and there's things that they can actually learn. And my belief is when they get back to the classroom, they're going to go like, I'd rather do this subject this way, or I'd rather actually learn that way. And so my aspect is to realize like a hybrid version is going to be coming. And the fact is at some point going back to the way we were is this is going to be the best opportunity for us to innovate for the next 50 years, right? Most of these kinds of events in the world is where most of the next generation of technology and understanding and kind of these struggling moments then cause us to create the next level of solutions that take us to the next level. And so to me, it's actually understanding what does this look like, and it's creating the struggling moments so we can now map technologies to help people do this, to where, think of it this way, is that right now the way schools are is they're all funded, for example, by states. But I know right now there are students who are in other states learning at a school that they're actually registered in my state. And so how does that, like, so now if we actually figure out virtual schools and we actually start to figure out how kids actually learn, can we actually start to match the learning to the kids so we actually help them as they move through, that we can actually help them actually learn either better or be more motivated to do that. And so part of this is you realize that some families move to be within a certain school district or to be within a certain kind of like a learning situation. And so part of this is to actually say, how do we actually then figure out how to supplement or augment different ways in which to do this? And so it's going to be a very interesting kind of next 10 years, I think, from an education perspective.
Well, Bob, I'm going to have you on again. So is there anything else that you'd like to say to the audience? You've said so much, but we could delve into so many different things.
The big thing to me is to realize that for you personally, as you start to choose to do new things, my thing is think about the job you're hiring the new thing to do for you. Why are you doing it now? What is wrong with the way something's happening? And what are you hoping for? Because I feel like in some cases we're consumers, and we feel like if we just buy things, it'll make things better. But we haven't spent the time to understand the trade-offs we're willing to make. And so to me, for us to get better at education, for us to get better at all these other things in the world, I think it has to start with us being better consumers and being very purposeful about what are we trying to do. And it's not just functional, because jobs are social, emotional, and functional. And so emotionally, why do you do what you do? Functionally. And so the more we can be in tune to our motivations, the easier it is to see other people's motivations. Beautifully said.
So where can people follow you? Where can they find you?
The best two things are Twitter, at Bmoesta, Bmoesta. LinkedIn is the other one. I've written a few books. I have a book writing process with a company called Scribe Media that is unbelievable, where we frame the struggling moments. We then frame kind of the topics to talk about, and then I just literally talk on 10 sessions for 2 hours, and then they help me convert it into a book. It's amazing.
That's wonderful.
So I just did a book called Demand Side Sales on that. I have another one called Learning to Build, which is really about my 4 mentors and kind of how I think of myself as a vessel that they pour. Like if these 4 have not come into my life, I would literally be stuck here in Detroit, probably doing a very menial job. But they actually provided me with such learning and insights that an illiterate dyslexic kid from Detroit can actually work on some of these really, really tough problems because of the beginner's mind, because of the way of thinking about questions, all those kinds of things. And so I feel it's my responsibility to kind of pass that on. So that's the next book I'm working on.
Oh, I can't wait. Well, I feel so honored to have interviewed you today. Excuse me, and to have had this time. So I hope that we can get back together soon.
I would love to.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks for having me.
Look, we have lots of great interviews on Nelda Live, so hit like and subscribe. There's much more to come.